Alright, identification. I'm not going to get too into it because this is going to be online, so we're going to have a lot of people from different areas. I will tell you where you can go to get that information. Plant identification is really helpful when you're in a site and working and you need to know what trees are surrounding and whether or not they're harmful. Or if you're working in a new urban site that needs to be developed so you can know what sort of plant would be good for that area. I live in Central Texas, and these have been my two favorite books that I've used for woodies and trees. This one, as you can see, is a little bit thicker, so it has a little bit more information, but it's just trees. There's no woodies in it. This one's nice and thin, so it has pretty much just the most common ones. It has this in the back. This is a key. The tree book doesn't have a key, and keys are really helpful if you know how to use them. Basically, if you find a plant that you don't know what it is, you check in the key and it guides you through it. You start at 1 and it asks you questions like if the leaves are minute, if they're opposite or alternate, that sort of thing. And it's a really great jumping off point if you really don't know that much about your local plants. Now, where do you find those books for your area? Look in wildflower stores, and if you have any local nature centers, that's a really good place to check. If you can't find any there, then go to your local forester. They will definitely know where to point you. Okay, so you probably heard me say a few terms earlier that you may not have understood when I was talking about the key. I'm now just going to give you a few brief terms that you'll need to know when reading your plant books. First, leaf arrangement. There are 3 different leaf arrangements. Opposite. 2 leaves directly opposite each other on the stem. Alternate. This one's very common. Basically, exactly what it sounds like. A leaf is not going to be opposite of another leaf. Whorled. These ones are not very common, and they're kind of hard to identify just because you really don't see them that often. Basically, it's when 3 or more leaves come out of the same place on a stem. Alright, next you have 3 different leaf types. The first one is simple. You'll see this in elm trees, in oak trees, those sort of things, where it's just one leaf coming off of a stem. Second is compound. A good example for this is the legume family or the pea family, where you have one smaller axis coming off of the main stem with small leaflets coming off of that one. And the third one is bicompound. You have one smaller axis coming off of the stem and then more axes coming off axes? And multiple axes coming off of that main axis with sub-leaflets on them. Each of the minor axes counts as one leaflet. Okay, but how do you tell the difference between these 3 types? It's fairly simple. The way to tell whether or not you have a leaf or a leaflet or a sub-leaflet is you look for what's called the axillary bud. So you look at the main stem. Here's your main stem, here's your leaf axil. Right in between there should be a little bud. If there's not, and that's because it's a compound leaf. Now that we've gotten compound down, you have different kinds of compound leaves. You have palmate, pinnate, and trifoliate. The easiest way to remember palmate is it's this. You have multiple leaves coming out of the same area. Then you have pinnate, like pecan trees or walnut trees. You have one axis and they're coming off this way. And then you have trifoliate, where you just have 3 leaflets, like poison ivy. Next thing we're going to talk about is the leaf margins. That's the edge of the leaf. You have 4 main different kinds of margins. Smooth, toothed or serrated, wavy, and lobed. Now be careful because you can kind of get toothed and wavy mixed up. That's just because they're very similar. So if you think it's toothed and it's not under there as toothed, then check wavy. There are 6 different kind of leaf bases. These ones are pretty easy to remember because they basically are what they look like. We have round, truncate, heart-shaped, oblique or asymmetrical, lobed, and tapered. And fruit types. There are 3 different kinds of fruit types. Capsule, pod, and winged. Capsule is pretty much anything that you typically think of when you think fruit. Pod is more bean-shaped. And winged are those ones that you sort of see spinning around sometimes or floating in the air. Those seeds. The last thing is probably something that you know, but I'm going to say it just in case. Upper story versus understory. Understory trees are ones that typically get about 10 feet tall, not much taller, whereas upper story trees are ones that get huge. A good example of upper story is oaks and maples and nut trees, elms, most trees that you think of as really large trees. Understory trees are more like pears, apples, redbuds, those sort of trees.